Everybody knows the corporate world pays well, from those flashy suits of those investment bankers to the corporate lawyers with their fast cars. It's a lucrative path to walk down. But for God-conscious Muslims, the corporate world can be a little bit tricky to navigate. From shaking hands with the opposite gender, to meetings in the pub, to finding a place to pray, whether or not you should wear a hijab. What about if you weren't wearing a hijab and now want to wear a hijab? How does that going to work? It can all be pretty daunting. Which is why in this video, we're going to talk to you about some practical workarounds that we found really useful in our careers in the corporate world. And stick around till the end and we will share with you the ultimate trump card that will be able to get you accelerated through your career. And it doesn't matter how prominently you're a Muslim, you will succeed if you do this one thing. I'm Ibrahim Khan. I've been studying economics and traditional Islamic sciences for over 13 years now. I've been lucky enough over the years to have been covered by various publications and have authored a book on halal investing. IFG started with my co-founder Mohsin alongside our legal careers in the city. Today, IFG is, alhamdulillah, a team of 20 plus people, and we serve the community through IFG, our content arm, and Curate Capital, our investment arm. The corporate world is very touchy-feely these days. Lots of handshakes and hugs and backslapping. And folks, we've all been there when that awkward moment when that woman who's possibly senior to you reaches out and wants to shake someone's hand, and that Muslim brother is petrified. He's shaking like a deer in headlights. He does not know where his hand should be, where he should be looking, and he doesn't know what to do. So folks, there's a number of different approaches that scholars have taken to this. The first approach is that avoid it if you can, but if you are absolutely pinned against the wall and you have to shake someone's hand, then rather than causing a lot of upset and a lot of rupture, and also because there's no shahwa involved, you can shake the hand, particularly for those who are much more older than you are in the elderly category. I really don't see there being too much of an issue. So this is the approach that some scholars have taken. I'm personally very sympathetic to this approach. I personally would avoid shaking the hands of women who are already familiar with Islamic culture and customs. So say for example in the Middle East, or Muslim women, you shouldn't necessarily be shaking their hand because there's absolutely no need to, and there won't be any offense whatsoever if you don't shake their hand. And if you're in a situation where you need to avoid the handshake, what you can do is do your hand clasp to the chest and do like a slight bow like a Japanese samurai, and people seem to find that quite appropriate. The other approach you can take is, if you're happy from a theological perspective with shaking women's hands in a position where there is no shahwa, perhaps it's an older woman, then you can actually head off the hug that you might see coming by actively preferring your hand, and it's almost like you're holding them off, right? Then you've got them where you need them, and make sure the hug doesn't come in. So that's another strategy. And by the way folks, if someone has got really bad BO, this works really well, or Eid Salah as well. Another strategy is, if you're going remote first or remote only in your job, then of course this sidesteps this entire issue entirely. You don't really have to connect physically with anyone. The other approach you can take is, if for example you are very comfortable with your team and happy to have that conversation where, look guys, it would be easier if I didn't shake the hands of the opposite gender, and is that okay? And you're comfortable doing that, or perhaps you follow that scholarly perspective where that is the approach that should be taken, then have that conversation and just be really polite and respectful about it, and just say, you know, this is part of my religion. It's really nice to meet you, and just make them feel like you've acknowledged them and appreciated them, regardless of the fact that you've not shaken their hand. Alcohol, of course, is a big no-no for Muslims, not just the drinking of it, of course we're not allowed to do that, but also sitting at the same table where alcohol is being drunk. So when so much of the corporate world revolves around drink, having networking events in bars after work, or meeting clients at nightclubs sometimes, or strip clubs I've even heard in some cases, that's crazy stuff. And for a Muslim, it's very difficult to navigate that, where you are expected, in order for your career to progress, to be also part of the team that partakes in all of these kind of behaviors. You can feel like you're really stuck between a rock and a hard place at times in situations like these. But it is possible to get around these kind of issues if you take the bull by the horns. What does that mean? Well, I'll tell you. It means that you get proactive when other people are organizing what night out they want to go on. Instead, why don't you be proactive and take that responsibility and then take them to Lahore Kebab House or somewhere else that is also equally nice. You can pick the restaurant that you like where it doesn't have a bar or it only has a very small bar, or you can even decide to go somewhere where there isn't any food or drink at all, like a VR arcade or mini golf or some kind of cinema outings. There are so many different things that can be done with a team in a corporate setting outside of pubs and nightclubs. Everyone without exception loves to have things taken off their plate. So if you're a proactive team member who's actively organizing things for the team, people will love that and you will actually get appreciated for that. And if they like the restaurant, then you'll get some brownie points for that as well. But what if that doesn't work? Well, what I used to do was I would go to work events. Typically, they will start off with some kind of food. So I would attend and have the food. But whenever it got slightly boozy or they started taking turns for the nightclub or other kinds of clubs, that's where I walked away. And that's perfectly fine. People can kind of accept that. They can see that, all right, you're part of the team in the sense that you're happy to turn up and have the pasta. But then once that's finished, then off you go and you need to do your own thing. Now, this is a problem that generally can be easily resolved. Most companies these days will have empty meeting rooms that you can book, or they might have a quiet space that's already there for you to pray in, or multi-faith rooms that you can pray in. There are often places that you can find to pray. There might even be a masjid nearby that you can pop out and visit, do your prayers and come back. Or worse come worse, you go to a local park or you go to a local area where you just put down your musalla and you pray, because Prophet ﷺ said the entire earth is a masjid for us. So really, there shouldn't be any issues in that regard. If none of those things are an option and you're really struggling to find a place, then you can ask your HR, and under UK law, they will be required to make reasonable accommodation for what you are asking for, especially if it's not disruptive to the actual work of the organization or business that you're part of. As for making the time for prayer, this is on you to manage your own workload and to set your own boundaries and expectations. Consider having a dedicated prayer time in your calendar so that no one else books in at that time, and that so that other people are aware that this is something that you do as well. And particularly for Jummah, I would highly recommend you have that blocked out in your calendar so that people are aware of it and you don't get calls put in at the wrong time. And you know what? And this may sound crazy to people, and this only should be used in an absolute emergency, but you can actually, in my humble view, pray in a very large disabled toilet where you're far away from, let's say, the WC, etc. That can be a private space if you find no other space to pray. And my reasoning here is that we are required to pray in a place that is clean. And Prophet ﷺ, when he was talking about places where people used to go to the toilet in his time, they would go out to a region, they would need to bury whatever it is that they did, there would be potential for stepping in things that were a bit, and that's how they used to have toilets in that period. These days, the reality is that if you've got, let's say, a very large disabled toilet and the floor is spotless and you are far away from any of the potentially dodgy stuff and you're just praying far away from that, I don't personally see that the area that you are praying in as being unclean in any way, shape or form. However, from the perspective of the room within which you are in, I would of course avoid it if you possibly can do. If you can't find anywhere else, such as a park, such as a masjid, such as a quiet meeting room, such as a stairwell for the emergency exit, if you can't find any of those places, then in an absolute emergency, this could be something that you look at. On the rare occasion where you might find it really difficult to pray your salawat because they're really close together, perhaps during the winter when Dhuhr, Asr and Maghrib are very close together, you can, on the rare occasion, without making it a common thing, actually join your salawat to make sure that you don't miss your salah, because that's the most important thing. You are not allowed to miss your salah. And people might think that, oh, I will kind of make it up at the end of the day. That is not how it works. In Islam, we are required to pray even when we are in a warfare situation. How crazy is that? You're supposed to still pray even when you are facing death. So you are not, ladies and gentlemen, facing death in the corporate world. So you should make time to pray regardless. We've spoken about this topic at length in many other articles and videos. However, the punchline is, ladies and gentlemen, that you need to make sure that your money is being invested in a halal way when it comes to your pension. Unfortunately, many Muslims just choose the default option for their pension. Even crazily, people who work at Islamic institutions and masajid will just choose the default option, and that's all based in haram investments. Some of these investments, these haram investments, then go ahead and fund the defense sector and actually funded wars like the Iraq War. So there we were as Muslims with our pensions funding the Iraq War, and there we were protesting on the streets against it. Can you see the dichotomy? The way around this is to email your HR and hopefully get access to your pension portal where there will be some kind of Sharia compliant option available, and then you just switch to that. If there isn't a Sharia compliant option available, then we have on our website a £10,000 legal opinion available to you for free. You can download that. It tells your HR that you need to put a Sharia compliant pension option available on your pension, because if you do not, then that is breaking the UK law, and quickly HR will listen to that. Now let's say your HR doesn't listen to this for some reason. Well, then you have a few options. The first is you can opt out of your pension, in which case you will lose a significant amount of money. I don't think that's a viable option. The second is you can take your pension and then very quickly transfer that out into a SIP, and then you manage that. A SIP is a personal pension that you are managing yourself. It does come with the risks because you're now managing your own money, but it does mean that you can very carefully allocate where that goes and make sure that it's going into the halal funds. And then the third option is, as I said, that you campaign hard and get the change to happen in your organization. Being different in an environment is always difficult, it's always daunting. But these days, thanks to digitalization, globalization, people are very conscious and aware of differences. So in most cases, people will be comfortable with you perhaps having a beard, perhaps wearing a hijab. This is not so uncommon these days. However, I do appreciate that still there can be some level of anxiety around this, particularly for women, because in the corporate world, the non-Muslim woman might be dressed in a very particular way, and a Muslim woman is dressed in a completely opposite way, and that can make you stand out. However, the good news for women in that position is that modest fashion is a thing, and it has taken off very spectacularly, and there are a number of options now. A quick search will show a whole load of long dresses that someone can wear, loosely fitted clothing that someone can wear that is stylish and corporate-y, but at the same time does tick the box of your Islamic morals and duties. Now, I get that Muslim women will say that, hang on, some non-Muslim women doll up and they get favor and they will progress faster through the ranks as a result of that. Ultimately, we know that there are red lines that we as Muslims can't cross, and with that will come barakah. And remember, if you toe that line, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give you that additional barakah. And stick around till the end. There is a final trump card that you can play that will allow you to catch up to any woman in the corporate organization. Naturally, as friendships develop, as you become part of the furniture, people might ask you questions like what your views on LGBTQ, the Israel-Palestine conflict might come up. They might even ask you to sign something or wear something to support a certain cause that might make you uncomfortable. And you might now be in that position where you don't really know how to respond. So learning how to navigate those situations in that context is extremely important for success in the corporate world. The best advice we can give you is that you should really clue yourself up about some of these key hot topic issues so that you can explain that coherently to the people that are sat in front of you in a way that makes sense to them without riling them up in the wrong way. It's also really important to understand the legal boundaries and the rights that you might have to say yes or no to certain things so that you're not unnecessarily being forced into a particular direction. And lastly, we appreciate that you might have some really strong views on these topics, but it is important to make sure that you remember that others might perceive that in a certain way. And remember that you are there for your work. You're not necessarily there to win a debate on the Israel-Palestine conflict, for example, because how you conduct yourself there and the emotion that you bring to that can have a bearing on wider things as well. That is not me saying don't talk about this issue. That is not me saying don't give da'wah. That is me saying give da'wah and talk about these issues, but with hikmah and wisdom as the Quran teaches. And if you honestly don't know the answer, then that's fine to say, look, I don't know the answer to that. I'll have to look it up and get back to you. And what about if you're being forced to wear a rainbow lanyard? Well, I think the way to navigate that is, firstly, most people aren't actually enforcing this. So many times you can get away with not wearing it or wearing whatever you like. And if anyone really pulls you up on it, just say that, look, this is either my religion or I can't find the other one, right? If you want to avoid the discussion entirely. But if someone is forcing you about it, then that's not really something that they can do as part of your work. And it's something that you should say, no, that's not acceptable. Just like you wouldn't wear a lanyard that celebrates polygamy, I also don't want to wear a lanyard that celebrates a certain other type of sexuality that I'm not comfortable with, and that's nothing to do with what we work on day to day, which might be something to do with engineering. Like, what's engineering got to do with rainbow lanyards? Nothing whatsoever. Sometimes people struggle with cleanliness, istinja, or even ghusl in a corporate environment. Well, the good news is that there's usually some kind of shower, there's usually some kind of disabled toilet, and you can, if you want to use water, you can get a bottle and you can do that as well. But in an absolute emergency situation, perhaps where you've gone to a client meeting or you've gone somewhere else where it's not your usual office and you now need to do istinja. Well, the first thing is, many people don't realize that water is not absolutely essential to you doing your business and cleaning yourself. And then secondly, here's a top tip. What you can do is you can flush the water once and get rid of all the business, and then you can flush the water again, and all of that water is actually clean. So you can actually use that to clean yourself with, and then use the toilet paper afterwards to do a double job as well. So istinja should not really be an issue when it comes to the corporate world. If you need to do ghusl, and then a top tip is that there's usually some kind of showering facilities around the cycle area that you can use, or if absolutely necessary, then you can go to a local gym, and if you've got a membership there, they definitely will have shower facilities. So those are some top tips on how you can navigate the situation to your best ability. But don't make this an excuse to miss salah. That's not acceptable. Well folks, you've made it this far, so I'm hoping you've liked the video so far. Please do help us out. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, share with your friends. We always need your support. Look, when it comes to the city and the corporate workplace, even prestigious schools and universities, we must remember as Muslims that we shouldn't be leading double lives. What we are like in the workplace should be what we are like at home. We should be conducting ourselves at that standard of Islamic excellence that we're very comfortable in any environment that we are operating in, and the environment adapts around us rather than us having to do a lot of adaptation to the environment. All of that being said, remember, ultimately you are there to do a job. You are paid in order to do certain activities, and how successfully you do those activities will in 99% of cases be the determinant of your progression through the ranks in that. And 90% of the time, your success in executing what you are being hired for is actually going to be a very important part of you progressing through the ranks or not. So it doesn't matter if you might be a modestly dressed woman, or you might have a beard, or you might take time to pray, or you might need to go and do your Jum'ah. As long as you are turning up and you're an absolute machine at your job and you're doing a great effort and you're turning out great output, that really is in most cases what you will be judged on. And if your organization is not judging you on that, you need to change the organization. You don't need to change yourself. And if you are indispensable to your organization, you're adding so much value to your organization, they will bend over backwards in order to accommodate for you so that you stay there and make them more money and make them look good. And at that point, when you ask them for time to do Friday prayers, or you might ask them for a multi-faith room, or you might ask them for this, that and the other, they are going to listen to that much, much more than if you had not been such a great employee. That is not to say that they shouldn't have been offering you those things anyway, but you are now in a position of strength. So the bottom line, folks, is do your job really well. That actually will dissolve and disappear most of the other challenges that we talked about in this video. So we've shared a bunch of tips about how to navigate the corporate world. How about you? Do you have anything that you used to do or do currently that is really helpful for navigating your corporate journey? Let us know in the comments below, and until next time, Assalamu alaikum.